The METUS Tech Show.
Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, a show for HVAC professionals by HVAC professionals.
The METUS Tech Show.
So, is it pronounced Capicola? Gabagool? Gabagool?
When I was a kid, I used to work in a grocery store deli, and it was Capicola. But then you watch The Sopranos, and it's Gabagool.
It was Gabagool. Hey, the Gabagool, and Tony went to the fridge to check if there was Gabagool, and he grabbed a slice, and
However you pronounce it, it's wicked good. It's so good.
I want to order it at the deli, but I feel like an idiot. I feel like I'm saying it wrong because, dude, is it Capicola? And some people say Kappa. Some people say Gabagool.
Yeah, I don't know. But you got to go to the Italian. You been to those Italian delis in Federal Hill in Providence?
I did. So working at Rhode Island Hospital, we, on second shift, every once in a while I would work second or third shift. I would stop at Federal Hill at a shop called Tony Colonials.
I think I've been there.
And the first time I walked in there, I was just blown away by all of the imported olives and cheeses, and they were baking fresh bread right on the spot. Nice, crusty, fresh Italian bread. And something that we would do is we'd use a George Foreman grill in the basement of the hospital where the HVAC guys hung out, and we'd throw some sausage in there. We get some hot, some sweet, and we had a jar of marinated peppers.
Oh, those are good.
Which was like a big thing of vinegar peppers.
Yeah.
Right. So
nice
it was
crispy.
I'd never had these before, and the guys would bring this out, and they're like, "Oh," and stick a fork in there and grab a vinegar pepper, and you'd have this crusty bread with some sausage,
fresh baked bread. It's so good. Don't forget I don't even know how to pronounce it. If it's prosciutto.
You got a little prosciutto.
Oh, it's so good. Some pancetta, the gabagool.
With some fresca. Well, no, I don't even know if that's Italian.
Me neither.
But anyway, the one thing that blew my mind is I had never tried imported sharp. Was it provolone?
Provolone, yeah. The real provolone. The imported stuff is so much better than anything you'll get there. The real provolone is so good.
It was a wedge of sharp provolone, and I remember it distinctively because it cost $16, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Yep.
But oh man, was it worth it? So yeah, the sharp provolone with the crusty bread and sausage, and we would have those marinated vinegar peppers in a jar.
Those are really good. Nice and crispy.
Yeah, just amazing. Yeah. Federal Hill, is just, I've gone there to eat with my wife several different places. One thing I remember, one of the restaurants tried it for the first time, limoncello.
Yeah, limoncello is really good.
Yeah, so you get a little shot of limoncello at the end of your meal, and they bring out a bottle. It was homemade limoncello in a bottle, and you could see that all the little pieces of lemon floating around in there. And I'm kind of like, what is this? And you have one. It's just, oh my God.
I got engaged on Federal Hill in Providence. We went to, I think it was Capriccios. I don't know if it's still there. And then we went to the P-PAC and watched Phantom of the Opera, and that's the last time I went to Providence. So
yeah. Well, one thing I couldn't get into was, and someone said, "Oh, you got to try this. You got to try this. You got to try this," and it was snail salad.
Oh no, yeah, I would totally get over that.
Not my cup of tea.
Yeah, no, I don't mind.
Yeah, that was it's something that's pretty popular on Federal Hill that everybody raved about, and this guy would bring in a bakery box of these. It was pizza slices, small rectangular pizza slices with just sauce on them.
Yeah.
And the only cheese that's on it is just a sprinkle of Parmesan.
Yep.
grated Parmesan on there, and that was it. And
Keep
I'm
it
like,
simple.
what? It's just sauce. How good can this be?
You know-
And it was actually really good.
You know, I love those the old timers, those old timer Italian guys, like in Centarpio's Pizza in East Boston. I doubt the guy's still up, but the old guy there when he was in charge, it was one of the best, top 2 anyway, pizza places in Boston, maybe the best in its day. But he was just an old guy, and it was setting it in his ways. And you go, hey, can I get this instead of no? I got a lot of no.
Yeah.
It's this. If it's not in the menu, it's no. And then there's the butcher shop in Worcester. I think I've mentioned this story on here before, but it was a hot summer day. My wife and kids were in the car, left the air conditioning on, go in and get some steaks to throw on the grill. My wife says, make sure it's grass-fed beef. So this old guy behind the counter, I think it's DeRico's actually in Worcester. He's behind the counter, and I go, hey, is that grass-fed beef? He goes, yeah, grass-fed beef.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
most of those
no nonsense.
places-
Whatever you want it to be.
You can order whatever you want, but they're going to make you what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're going to eat it.
Yeah.
And that's
This
it.
is what I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, yeah, no.
absolutely.
Now I think jeez, there's not really. I'm trying to figure out what the best place. You know, there's a place that's not too far from my house in West Boylston. I forget the name of it, but it's like a little Italian bakery and deli shop there. And for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. But my wife goes there quite a bit, and their sandwiches are pretty decent. But it's not like going to Federal Hill. There's no comparison to Federal Hill.
So I just remember the name of that pizza place that makes the sauce slices. D. Paul Mary's.
Oh, yeah,
so if you go to D. Paul Mary's on Federal Hill, they give you a bakery box with a bunch of slices, and the crust, the base of it is really crispy, almost like a crispy bread, but it's just sauce, gravy, right? Just the sauce on there. And a little sprinkling of Parmesan cheese. And if you're a big cheese head, you like the mozzarella traditional style pizza, you're going to be disappointed. But you have to try it. It's different. It's just
good.
delicious.
It's delicious. There's an Italian restaurant. I forget which one it is, but they got a big cheese wheel, giant cheese wheel, and it's a bowl. And I think it's Parmesan cheese. In every pasta dish, before it goes onto a plate, the pasta goes in there. It's nice and hot, and they stir it around in this cheese bowl, and it gets the cheese on the pasta, and the pasta goes on the plate. It's so good.
Steve, nothing like homemade pasta.
Now, you live pretty close. How long does it take for you to get to Providence?
I could be at Federal Hill from my house in 35 minutes.
And then it's an hour to the office. So in an hour and a half, roughly, you should be here with that food.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, once I'm at Federal Hill, I think I can kind of take a shortcut and get onto 495 through Attleboro or something.
You can take the Acela train from Boston, and you're in Providence in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You guys are so much more cultured than
So what are you saying? I got to pick up some Tony Colonials on the way?
Absolutely.
All right, yeah. I'll get some sweets and some hots and some gabagool.
I'm gaining weight just listening to you. All right. So welcome, everybody, to the METUS Tech Show. What are we going to talk about today, guys?
P-traps.
Traps.
P-traps.
Yeah.
All right. So let's start off let's start off with
always
a short part of it. Let's just go to condensate traps first, because that's going to be real quick. Condensate
this
traps.
is always a hot topic in class.
Yeah, people always ask us, do I need to put a condensate trap in? The answer is no. There's not a single piece of equipment that we want to see a trap on, except for one. The multi-position air handler, whether it's a City Multi or an M series or a P series, right? The instructions will say that you can put a trap on there, but that drain is on the positive side of the fan. If you're putting a trap on there, they say it's for loss, air loss, but you're looking at a 3/4 inch PVC pipe. You're not going to get a whole lot of air coming out of there. So you can put a trap there, but in my opinion, it's just another place for water to collect and maybe clog. So I always tell people, no traps, no condensate traps on any of our equipment.
Yeah, the big reason being, I think it's just because our equipment is so efficient. They like to keep the equipment efficient.
Right.
And in Europe and Japan, they're paying a lot more for electricity. So every little bit counts.
Yeah.
Every little bit counts.
I mean, it's not going to hurt to put a trap on there, but it's just like I said, it's just another potential maintenance issue down the road.
So no condensate traps on any of our equipment except for the multi-position air handler, and that's still optional.
Right.
And it's basically so we don't lose any capacity. We don't have any capacity loss on that. But there are some rules that we have to still follow with condensate lines. And just speaking from personal experience, if you run too long of a condensate line, we're talking 100 feet of 3/4 condensate line, you're going to run into some issues.
Right. It won't drain. It won't drain
it'll create a vacuum.
Yep.
You'll get a vacuum in that line, and really putting in vents is not going to be always the answer to your problem. Increasing the line size, right? If you have a main gravity line catching all these drains off of multiple air handlers and wall units and whatever it is, that you have to upsize that drain line if you're running long lengths.
Yep. I'm sorry. And while we're talking about traps, I want to mention two things before I forget. An older generation air handler, which we haven't sold in several years, that drain was on the suction side of the fan, so that did require a trap. And you can tell because it's a light gray color air handler. Right? If it's a dark air handler, it's on the positive side. It doesn't need it. The other thing I want to talk about is you got to look at our air handlers, and if the connection for the drain is this blue, kind of like a clear PVC drain, then that means it's got a lift up mechanism or a pump. So that doesn't need to have a trap on that. You can actually go up a certain distance, check your manual to find out what the limits are to come across, and then go up, and then you go into a gravity drain after that. So we've had people hang those air handlers upside down, thinking that blue connection was the actual gravity drain, but that means that there's a pump in there. So be careful. Follow the instructions. And Where can I get these instructions, Bryn?
MyLink Drive, of course, and the installation manual. It'll tell you all that. But our one-way cassette, our four-way cassette, and our ducted units are the 3 units. You'll see that blue port, and we always want to make sure that's on the top.
Yep.
Otherwise, you put it in upside down.
All right. So that does it for condensate traps. Let's focus the rest of this conversation on refrigerant traps. Right?
One thing I wanted to add to condensate traps is do not make your own trap if you can help it. Buy a preformed P-trap. I've seen some monstrosities where people take about 6 or 7 elbows and try and make their own traps, and at the end of it, it's not a trap.
Yeah, the traps I really like are the ones that are clear and they come with a brush.
Yeah, the easy traps.
It's got like a T. It's got like easy traps. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the other thing you got to pay attention to, as Steve mentioned, with longer PVC runs for your drain, we don't require a trap, but also make sure that you're hanging that so that you're not creating a trap.
Yeah.
I ran into a lot of issues when I was in a van of 100-foot runs of 3/4 PVC. That tends to sag if you're not securing that properly. And now you created a trap.
And it'll sag
good point.
in different places. And when you have 2 traps in line with each other or in series, then it's not going to drain.
Yep.
So and there is a maximum horizontal length that you can go on our traps, and it's in the manual. It states the max horizontal length.
Yep.
And follow local codes as far as insulating those drain lines, because I'll tell you, some of those drain lines in the right conditions can sweat.
Yeah, the first time I taught a class in California, I mentioned that you got to insulate. You should insulate the condensate drain, and they're like, "Why?" He goes, "Don't you guys insulate the drains here?" They go, "No." I go, "It's because you have no humidity. That's why."
It's too dry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, but if you're in an attic in the Northeast,
or Mississippi or the Panhandle, actually anywhere in Florida, not just the Panhandle, but anywhere on the Gulf Coast.
Yep.
Anywhere there. All right, so that does it for condensate traps. Let's move on to refrigerant traps. I think we'll focus on those for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got to keep the old mentality out of your mind as far as refrigerant traps, because, back in the day, installing unitary equipment, there was always a rule of thumb. Yeah. Right, that every 16 feet of rise, I'm going to add a trap so I can get oil back to my compressor.
See, the
Mitsubishi, that's out the window.
Yeah, the rule of thumb that I've always remember hearing is that it should be every 20 feet of vertical rise, you have a P trap. I know some people call them U traps. I've always called them P traps.
Yep.
But there's only a few reasons we want to put a trap. And I'm speaking in general refrigeration terms now, right? A trap is going to be used either to make sure that the oil goes back to the compressor, which really the only place in the system we want to see oil is in the compressor. It's the only place we need to see oil is in the compressor.
Yep.
We can also use traps to prevent oil from accumulating in the evaporator coil. And we can also use traps from preventing liquid refrigerant or oil from entering the compressor in the off cycle. And that's about it. But for the most part, when we talk about putting a trap in here, I think we're concerned with just oil return to the compressor. And the rule of thumb that I heard, like I said, every feet of rise, there's a trap of every 20 feet. Steve heard 16 feet. But let's be clear. For our refrigeration systems, our Mitsubishi equipment, right, we don't follow those standard industry rules. We don't put traps in there for every feet of rise. Follow the DSB. Try to, do an as-built, make sure you got those line lengths in the DSB. Don't exceed the maximum lift. Don't exceed the maximum line length. And you do not need traps in our system. So don't follow those industry standards when you're installing our equipment. Follow what the DSB says, because the DSB, if you exceed a certain distance on some of the equipment, it'll upsize a line for you, right? Now, that said, we always say in class, all of us have said it, no traps, no traps, no traps. Mm-hmm. But are there times when we want to see a refrigerant trap in one of our systems?
Not in the sense of a traditional P-trap, where we've got an actual place for that oil to collect. We do require with twinning kits, so if we're twinning an R2 series or a Y series, what we look for is an inverted trap. So before our twinning kit, if we have two outdoor units that we're twinning together, if we have a distance of 6 feet from our outdoor unit to that twinning kit before we hit our other outdoor unit, we want to put an inverted trap in there. Okay. And that's just to make sure that we keep oil on that further outdoor unit.
So we can't say no traps, period, because you just said there's certain times when we actually need a trap in there.
Yep.
A majority of the time, a lot of installers are placing the outdoor main and outdoor sub real close to each other. So that trap's not needed. But in the situation where, and this could be because of the type of install location, they may want to spread the outdoor main and sub apart from each other. So what you're talking about, Bryn, is spot on. We need an inverted trap in between those two units. Now, can a contractor out in the field unintentionally make a trap?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You got to watch what you're doing. Well, let's talk about, let's just say I'm using soft copper or hard copper. It doesn't really matter. And let's just say I'm running across the ceiling of a basement, and I come across a joist or a beam or something. I can't cut and go through it.
No.
So I'm going to have to go underneath it, down and over and up. So am I creating a trap then?
You certainly
and possibly.
can. Yeah. Steve, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so there's a little rule to keep it from being a trap. And basically that's, and let's say you're going up underneath a joist or a beam in a building, if we're running soft line set and it's just a sweep that's hand rolled with the soft line set, we're not going to consider that a trap. No. We're not going to want to do that multiple times. We're going to try and refrain from doing that multiple times, but it's not considered a trap. But if I'm running hard pipe and I'm elbowing underneath a beam in a building, I want to make sure that my vertical drop, whatever the measurement of my vertical drop is, my horizontal run underneath that should be double the length of the vertical drop, and that makes it not a trap.
Now, are you measuring the vertical drop and on the other side the vertical riser, or just one way?
Just one way.
Okay.
Just one way.
So I'm running a pipe across. Let's just say it's hard copper and I'm using 90s. I'm running across. I come to a beam that I have to go down and around. I come down, let's just say a foot. So when I go horizontal on the next 90, I have to make sure it's at least 2 feet and then come up a foot.
Yep. Exactly.
And continue. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, and again, we don't want to make a habit of doing this,
right?
Because any elbows and turns in a line like that. It's going to cause turbulence and cavitation, and we're trying to avoid that.
So in the example we just used, we're going down, over, and back up underneath a joist. But what if I have to go up and over something? Is it the same rule? My horizontal piece, once I rise, has to be double.
Same rule.
Yeah. Okay.
Same rule. Yes.
Right.
And honestly, those I'd probably try to avoid even more. An inverted trap over something, even if you are, doing your 2 times the vertical to come across horizontally. That's something I definitely want to avoid doing more than once in a single run.
And why is that?
Right.
I feel like you're more likely to get some issues with oil return on a inverted trap than you would with a traditional, regular trap.
Makes
so
sense.
I try to avoid it best you can doing it either way. But if you do have to, try to go under so that you can make sure you're not trapping that oil somewhere.
Yeah.
And remember, every 90-degree elbow we use adds about a foot and a half of pipe to the overall length of the system. So
Right.
if we're entering this into Diamond System Builder, thank God Diamond System Builder will red flag us if we exceed the line length. And that could be just because we use too many elbows.
Yeah. I want to say that again, Steve. I want to make sure that people understand that. And I know this is not a DSB episode, but I want to go back there. You should always have a Diamond System Builder file before you start an installation. I'm going to say this, you must have one. And I tell this to the students in class. If you don't have a DSB to follow, don't start the installation. Insist on one. And a lot of guys, when they design it and they put the DSB in, they don't put any lengths or elbows in there. So you need to add those. So you actually need the file, the electronic file on your laptop. You can download DSB software for free through mylinkdrive.com on the software tab. But you need to make sure that you take a really good guess at those line lengths and those elbows, and you need to put them in there. Because if you're given a plan or not given a plan and you run everything and then you go to build your as-built and everything's already installed, it's too late. If you've exceeded a length, if you put too many 90s in there, it's too late. And the sad fact is, if you find a problem after that's done, the chances of it getting fixed are very, very slim.
Yep.
So make sure, I'm going to say it again, don't start an installation without a DSB file. And make sure that you're taking a good guess at those lengths and the number of 90s you're going to use. And then absolutely, this is another requirement, make sure you change that and you put the actual lengths of pipe in there and the actual number of 90s, and make sure it's an as-built and it's a true representation of what's installed. That will save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. And one of the best features of that, it tells you exactly how much refrigerant you need to add to that system.
Yep.
Yeah, because that initial Diamond System Builder file could have been put together by someone in sales, maybe an engineer, maybe an estimator that doesn't know, and he's guesstimating what's going to happen on this job site for pipe length. But we all know as installers, nothing ever goes according to plan. And you got to work with plumbers, you got to work with electricians on this job site. You may need to extend lengths of pipe. So important, like Paul, you just said, make sure that you revise that Diamond System Builder to an as-built at the end, so that, number one, you're not exceeding line lengths. You're not exceeding, another thing we didn't talk about, vertical separation.
Yes.
There's a vertical separation restriction between outdoor unit to branch controller, outdoor unit to indoor units.
In fact, I'm sorry, Steve, but I didn't mean to step on you, but when you're entering the equipment into Diamond System Builder, it asks you for an elevation, right? And so whatever you use for the reference of the first thing that's right, usually it's the outdoor unit we're putting in. So if that outdoor unit's on a roof and you're calling that elevation 0, then all the elevations for everything else are going to be a negative number, right?
Right.
And if you're on a 20-foot roof, if you got a 2-story building and that outdoor unit is 20 feet up, you can call that 20 feet, and you come down 10 feet to the branch box, you can call that 10 feet.
Right.
But whatever you use for that first reference, use that same thing. That, and Diamond System Builder will keep track of that for you.
Yeah, I have that conversation a lot with contractors in my city multi when we talk about Diamond System Builder, is if you say your outdoor unit's at 2 feet because it's outside on the ground, the software doesn't care if that wall mount is 8 feet off the floor on the 3rd floor. doesn't care where on the wall it's been mounted. It's what's my vertical separation from my outdoor unit. That's what that height, measurement is for, is what's my vertical separation from my outdoor unit. And the reason why is so that we can make sure we're not, over exceeding what that unit can do. So that's really important. The other thing with Diamond System Builder that I talk about, which we just touched on, is if you're in the van and you're going for your first install on a city multi, especially if you've attended our 3-day class, sometimes, like Steve said, you may have somebody else that's generating that Diamond System Builder. And what's great is we have DSGs that help out with startups. And essentially what the contractor does is they'll do the whole install and then give that information to the DSG or their sales guy to make the edits in Diamond System Builder so they can get their accurate trim charge. But what I say is especially if you've attended this 3-day class, take ownership of that. Get that Diamond System Builder file and make those edits on site so you don't have to make a phone call to figure out what your charge is. You can edit that file on site while you're doing the work so that when comes time to add refrigerant, you can do it right there.
Yeah. And building the as-built, the hardest thing about putting the as-built together is gathering the information. So I used to tell folks, work smart, not hard. As you're running these lines, keep track of the lengths, keep track of the 90s. Write it down on the plan that they're going to give you, and either enter it as you go along or write it down and enter it later. But you need that as-built. And back to something, Steve, that you said a little while ago, I've asked this question for 11 years in class. Yeah. I've asked thousands of people this question. And what is the percentage of time that the job goes 100% according to plan? And I've never gotten an answer other than 0. There's no job that goes 100% according to plan ever. So that's why that initial DSB is not good. You need to have the as-built. I know we've turned this into a DSB conversation.
Well,
we started off with traps.
Well, you have to. You have to because, and I'll tell you, what happens if you don't have a DSB? Let's just say you just wing it and you over exceed line sets and everything else. I'll give you an example. We had a job site where they were losing compressors on this one city multi-system, trying to figure out why. And when they went and looked at how much oil was in the compressor and how much oil was in the accumulator, they pulled out a tablespoon of oil.
Yeah.
Where did all this oil go?
Not back to the compressor.
First question we ask is, where is the DSB? It's non-existent. We didn't make one.
Yeah.
All right. So what ends up happening? We find that 3 or 4 air handlers in this building with over-exceeded line lengths, over-exceeded vertical separation. Where's all the oil? They're sitting in the coils of these air handlers.
Yep.
Right. So
if the system is designed properly, most of the oil stays in the outdoor unit if it's designed properly. Right. So it doesn't really go throughout the system. That's why you have to do it. And the DSB, the initial DSB is a plan. And an old buddy of mine who's since passed away used to say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm going to say this again. I think it's a third time. If you're a contractor and you show up to install a city multi piece of equipment and you do not have a DSB, don't start the installation. Get a DSB.
Absolutely.
Now, these rules apply. I know we're talking a lot about commercial, but these rules apply to residential as well. Yeah. We have a vertical separation limit, and we also have a line length limit, obviously, for residential equipment. And what really irks me out in the field is when I see line sets rolled up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. You got a 50-foot line set, and you use 25 feet of it, and you roll the rest up. Well, that's poor. Number one, that's hack.
Well, hold on.
Sorry.
No, it is. But let's talk about that because I don't know how easy it is to find this in the manual. I haven't looked in a while. But on the M&P series side, we do have a minimum line length, right? Like, I don't want to take an M or a P series outdoor unit and put it on wall brackets on the outside of the building and then run just a foot or two of line to a wall unit on the other side of that wall. Why is that?
Well, first of all, will it work?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it'll work.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll work. It'll run just fine. But what's going to happen? What's the customer going to experience?
There's a couple of things. First of all, you could hear noise. So let's just take a standard M series unit. Typically, not for every piece of equipment, but typically you can run up to 25 feet of line without having to add refrigerant. So think about that. If you only run a foot of line, now you've got more refrigerant than you need, and you may hear that refrigerant. Another thing to keep in mind is acoustics, right? If you mount that unit on a wall of a wood frame structure, and listen, this is it could go. You could install 100 of these and never have an issue, and then you install one and it's an issue. And I've been there where it hits just right, the screws hit just right, the line set hits just right on a 2x4 or something, and it turns that wall into a speaker. So a little bit of refrigerant flowing through a pipe, hitting touching against the wall just right may cause that. So those are the things you got to worry about, a wall bracket, and then specifically with the extra refrigerant in there. So we want to see, I think the instructions, if I'm not mistaken, recommend a minimum of 16 feet of line, and that's only for noise, for, additional. Everything makes noise, but that's just an unwanted noise. And what you don't want to do is, on the outdoor unit, is just put a roll of soft copper there and roll it and keep it there behind the unit all rolled up, because now you just created a trap.
Yep. I get this question all the time in residential, because we do actually have a mention about this 16 feet. And essentially it's just letting the contractor, the technician know, hey, if your line set total, because I used to see it all the time. I was residential when I was in a van. You'd have a 1-to-1. And so they mount the outdoor unit on a stand, and then they come up 6 feet right inside to that wall mount. And we say that anything under 6 feet may make noise. You may hear that liquid rushing a little bit more than you would if you were beyond that 16 feet. So what I get asked a lot in the class is, okay, well then why don't I just have 16 feet and coil it up? If we coil it up vertically, obviously there's a trap. Yep. And then people go, well, why don't I do it horizontally? You're still trapping, right? A lot of times people say, oh, if you put it horizontal under the unit, then there's no trap. But realistically, there's about 3 or 4 traps depending on how many rolls.
And it looks awful.
That too.
Yeah. I got a great war story from years past, and this was a ductless system, and I don't remember the brand. Showed up at this house, and the guy looked like he hadn't cut his grass in months, and grass is growing around the outdoor unit. And I look, and there's a bunch of rusty compressors in the grass, small ductless compressors sitting there. And he says, "Yeah, I just replaced 2 compressors in the last 3 years, and I'm having problems with this unit again." So I hook my gauges up to this unit, and I notice my head pressure shoots through the roof. My suction pressure goes into a vacuum.
Wow.
And I can't figure out why. And I'm looking at this, and charge is correct. Pull the charge out, weigh it in. Can't figure out for the life of me what's going on. But I did notice about 20 feet of soft line set rolled up vertically, and it was clipped to the side of the house that the guy actually painted the line set the color of the house. It looked terrible. What I recommended was to take that coil out and just run the pipe over, reflare it, connect it, and see what happens. And when I pulled that line set, that rolled up coil off the wall off the side of the house,
I bet it was
the weight of what was in that line set was full of oil.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was creating a vacuum. The system could not pump that oil back in.
Yeah.
It was actually pulling itself into a vacuum. Yeah. And the guy said he had never seen the system run so good after that. Mm-hmm. Great delta T across the coil that he didn't have before. And I don't know if the system's still running or if you ever changed another compressor, but
I doubt he changed another compressor. But I think we mentioned this on the episode that we did about compressor diagnostics. But if you're replacing a compressor and you don't know why it failed, guess what's going to happen to the second one?
Oh, yeah.
It's going to fail.
Yep.
You need to know why a compressor failed, or it's going to fail again. Because if you don't fix what caused the first compressor to fail, the second one's going to fail. So shame on the guy who replaced the first one.
Yeah, and shame on him for not taking the old compressors back with him. Don't ever leave old compressors out on someone's yard.
You know what, Steve? But that was enough of a red flag. You go, hold on there. I see compressors here. So he did you a favor. Although I think you would have noticed the coil rolled up against the house no matter what.
Yeah. But it was kind of camouflaged there because, like I said, he painted it the same color of his house.
Yeah.
It was all chipping, and you know what that looks like.
Yeah. So those coils essentially created like an oil slug. So we had a restriction of just oil inside that line.
Yeah. Yeah, because think about it. All those compressors you're changing, the oil's going somewhere.
Yep.
And it was in that line set. Like I said, I remember all the oil because I threw that coil in the back of my van and didn't cap it. And I had a big mess in the floor of the van to clean up.
Yeah, no, oil is at the compressor is actually the only place in the system it's really, really needed. So, and that's what traps can actually do, right? And in that case, it was definitely a trap, a huge trap. So you want to avoid that. A trap can be your friend. It can ensure that oil returns back to the compressor, but misapplied, it can prevent oil from going back to the compressor, and that's a death certificate for that compressor.
Yeah, it's all in the design of the system.
Yep.
Depends on what it's calling for.
Yep. So anything, I know we kind of got off track here with DSB and then compressors, but is there anything else we need to mention in regards to traps, refrigerant traps or condensate traps?
No, just refer to your unit-specific installation manual. Make sure that you're following all of the rules, and you can find that on mylinkdrive.com. Look up the model number of that unit, and you'll have access to installation manuals, service manuals, parts manuals, you name it. And don't be afraid to take a look at our application notes.
Yep.
There are always application notes that are handy that tell you what to do when you need to bury refrigerant lines, what we recommend.
And or if you're in Denver and you're high altitudes, there's a white paper for high altitudes because things change. And the DSB, right? The DSB, if I'm doing a 1-to-1, I'm going to put it in DSB because not only is it going to tell me what I need for refrigerant charge, it's also gonna give me my output BTUs under design conditions in heating and in cooling. So that's another important thing. I know, again, it's not the topic of this podcast, but if I do a DSB and I say, hey, I'm going to put this 6,000 BTU wall unit in this room, it's going to tell me what the output BTUs are if I'm under design conditions. And if I'm only getting 4,000 BTUs out of there because it's in a long line, because there's always the D rate for the line length, but I needed 6, then I'm going to have to revisit things. So please, 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 DSB, use it, enter it, use it for every system that you install. That really is going to it could potentially save you a huge headache.
Yep.
Yeah. I just wanted to add in, we talked about elbows quite a bit. Now, what does Mitsubishi consider an elbow? It's any fitting bought at a supply house, and hopefully it's a long radius 90 refrigeration fitting.
It should be, yep.
That's considered an elbow as far as Diamond System Builder, as far as when you're putting the system together. A ratcheting bender or machining type bender that you might be using. I don't think anybody's using spring benders anymore. You remember those, Paul?
You know something? I'm going to say that when I first started in this trade, I bought a set of spring benders and I went to use it and it got stuck on that bend. And as far as I know, it's still there.
It's horrible.
That was like over 30 years ago. As far as I know, it's still there underneath the insulation because I couldn't get it out. But but those were horrible. So if we're using a mechanical bender, is that an elbow?
It is an elbow. It is considered a long radius 90. It is an elbow. But if I'm rolling out a line set and I make a sweep with that line set where I'm not making a tight bend, I'm just making a really long radius sweep, that is not considered an elbow. And you can do that without a problem.
Right. And I'm like you, Steve. I think we both agree on this. I would rather use hard copper than soft copper. I don't like it because the first time I unrolled a soft roll, it looked like a roller coaster. It looked like a bumpy little road. There was all these little things in there. And it takes practice to unroll that and do it right. So
I'll tell you, back in my day, I used to be one hell of a sculptor with soft tubing. I got pretty good at it. And then when the ratcheting bender came out, that changed everything.
Yeah.
You can do some really beautiful work with soft line sets.
Yep.
Yeah.
They actually make now something that goes inside the piping. Have you seen that? So rather than having the spring bender on the outside of the line set, it's like a little hose-looking thing that you shove inside of the pipe.
I did. Yeah, I've seen that.
Without kinking it.
Yeah,
I've
seen that.
The problem is that's only at the end, right? Because if you do it halfway through your run, there goes that piece of vinyl hosing because it's inside the pipe. You can't do a bend halfway through your line set because you can't get it out.
Right. Right.
I've never seen that.
So just to recap, condensate traps, with the exception of our multi-position air handler, we don't want to see any condensate traps. For our multi-position air handler, it's recommended because it is on the positive side pressure.
It's recommended, but if you don't put one in, I don't think it's the end of the world.
No issues. Yep. I mean, we're just talking about 3/4 inch port for us to lose some of that capacity. So,
well, you know what I used to tell the guys in class? If the amount of air that's coming out of that 3/4 inch port, if that's going to be the difference between your system working properly or not, then you didn't design this right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have a drain line on a regular ducted unit, and it's not draining, and this goes for any unitary piece of equipment. If your drain line is not draining and your drain pan's full, check your filters, check your coils, make sure they're clean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because it will create a vacuum and you'll hold water back.
Yep. And then when it comes to refrigerant traps, no refrigerant traps unless we're looking at a Y series or R2 series where we're twinning, in which case before our branch point, we have 6 feet or more of line set between our 2 outdoor units to the twinning kit. We want to make sure we have an inverted trap, and that's a minimum height of 7 7/8 inches, and that's only on the liquid side. We don't have to put that inverted trap on the vapor side.
Awesome.
right. And we don't follow the industry standard rule of thumb for every 15 to 20 feet of riser. We don't put traps in there.
Nope.
Right. And if we do have to turn down or make or have a riser or a drop, then we want to make sure that the horizontal run after that, like if we're going around a beam, we want to make sure the horizontal run is double the distance of the drop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. I think that covers it. And use DSB. Use
DSB.
Diamond System Builder. It's free. Download.
And don't forget your vinegar, peppers, and sharp provolone.
Oh, the sharp
Your hots
provolone's
and your
wicked
sweets.
good.
If you have,
But Steve, you're not joking. When you taste that real provolone, I mean, you can go to a grocery store deli and get provolone. It's the domestic stuff. It's okay. But when you get that sharp, that real provolone cheese, it's like a whole different food altogether. It's like God Himself made that. It's so good.
cheese is just an amazing food. Something that smells like feet, and you can grade the quality of the cheese if it smells more like feet. It's disgusting, but it's amazing that we that's where we go to for our comfort food.
Yeah, there's basically
cheese.
only 2 cheeses I really find disgusting, and that's just blue cheese and gorgonzola. I can't stand them. Other than that, now we talked about cheese before too, but I think knows that Juan likes Pismo steak. So what does he know? He likes blue cheese.
No, Juan likes to put blue cheese on jelly on toast.
He's got
no.
zero credibility when it comes to food because of the Pismo thing. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
You guys are so much more cultured than me. Because all we have is, delis out in Western Mass where it's a country store in every small town. You walk in, it's like a tiny little corner store, and then in the back they have a deli. And I think my favorite subs to get from there is like a Thanksgiving grinder. I don't get the Italian stuff like you do out here.
They have the Wawas, those gas stations. I don't think they have any around here, but they got what is it called? The Gobbler Bowl around Thanksgiving, where it's basically a turkey dinner inside a bowl.
Yep.
At a gas station?
Yeah, it's a Wawa.
Is that like gas station sushi?
Yeah.
But better.
Stay away from it.
Oh, go wrong. It's no worse than those 7-Eleven hot dogs that have been on that roller for 6 years.
Yeah.
I'll still
the
partake.
boiled peanuts in Georgia at the gas station. But that's for another episode.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right.
Take care.